What if our newest wanderer from the deep, the interstellar visitor many are calling 3I Atlas, isn't merely an ancient comet after all, but something more unusual? Imagine a silent scout from far beyond our skies, drifting with purpose, studying our blue world while threading a path so cleverly chosen it almost feels deliberate. When I learned that this traveller's route brushes remarkably close to Venus, Mars, and Jupiter, and that the odds of such a tour happening by random chance hover around just 5 in 100,000, it sent a cool ripple down my spine, the pleasant kind that arrives when curiosity meets wonder. Tonight we'll drift together through that what if, letting the questions unfold like constellations, soft and unhurried. Settle in, breathe, let the day loosen its grip. This is a quiet voyage for sleepy minds, a gentle astronomy that keeps one eye on science and the other on dreams. And if these calm, stargazing lullabies help you unwind, take a moment, without breaking your drowsy flow, to like and subscribe to Space Historian so you can find your way back here whenever you need a peaceful orbit. On the date of July 1st, 2025, our alert systems noticed something unusual. The Asteroid Terrestrial Impact Last Alert System, ATLAS, flagged an object moving in a way that drew the focus of observatories across the planet. It wasn't just another native stone looping around our sun. This one, tagged as interstellar, carried too much speed and came from too odd an angle to be a child of our own stellar nursery. Think for a moment about what interstellar truly implies. Most everything that shares our sun, dust, pebbles, asteroids, dwarf planets, the great worlds themselves, condensed from the same long-ago cloud, about 4.5 billion years in the past. Their paths obey the sun's gravity, the way rivers obey the lay of a valley. But this visitor did not grow up here. It likely began in another neighborhood entirely, under a different star, with different chemistry and different stories in its ice and rock. So far, we've recognized only 3 such guests from beyond. The first, Oumuamua in 2017, dropped by like a cryptic message that arrived too fast and left too quickly to be fully read. The second 2I/Borisov in 2019 behaved much more like a familiar comet, complete with a frosty coma and tail. Now comes this third visitor, 3I Atlas, and the puzzle it brings feels bigger than simple cataloguing. It nudges at questions that reach beyond astronomy and into the nature of intelligence itself. Picture our traveller sweeping through the sunlight at roughly 61 kilometers per second. That is not merely quick, that is breathtakingly swift by the standards of drifting ice and stone. For comparison, the Parker Solar Probe, the speed champion among our machines, can graze 200 kilometers per second at its closest kiss with the sun, but only by diving deep into the furnace and borrowing the star's gravity for a slingshot. 3I Atlas, by contrast, arrived already moving at about a third of that top speed, as if some far-off process had flung it with intent long before it crossed our threshold. What pins astronomers to their chairs isn't just the speed, but the track. Researchers, including Harvard astrophysicist Avi Loeb and colleagues, have highlighted analyses suggesting that this object's route offers unusually favorable passes near Venus, Mars, and Jupiter. The chance that a purely random interstellar trajectory would thread those needles so neatly has been estimated at around 0.005%. In the language of statistics, that's the kind of number that invites you to look for an underlying cause. Pause with that thought. Imagine throwing a dart at a map of the solar system from several light years away. Not only does the dart have to land on the map at all, it has to skim past multiple planets at distances that are genuinely useful for observation. That is a lot to ask of luck. Yet here, 3I Atlas is apparently entering from the direction of Sagittarius and, in time, leaving for the borderland between Gemini and Orion, after what looks suspiciously like a well-placed grand tour. The timing is curious too. The object will make its closest approach to the Sun, perihelion, on October 29, 2025. During that period, as seen from Earth, it'll lie too near the Sun's glare to observe for several weeks. From a reconnaissance perspective, that geometry creates a strangely convenient window for watching our world while remaining hidden inside the daylight, screened by the Sun's brilliance. It's as if the cosmos itself placed a finger to its lips. If, just for the sake of this bedtime speculation, the visitor were artificial, the timeline would be intriguing. Estimates suggest it entered the distant outskirts of our solar system some 8,000 years ago, around the era when human cultures were discovering metals, laying out the first enduring cities, carving symbols that became writing, and tending the fields in organized ways. Those were the first faint signals we sent into the dark: fires in the night, straight lines on the earth, long-lived works in stone and clay. If someone far away watched for such signs, that might be when we became worth a closer look. Now consider how 3I Atlas presents itself. Many comets, as they drift sunward, heat up and begin to shed gases and dust. Plumes erupt, tails sprout, molecules glow in the ultraviolet. In this case, observations with the James Webb Space Telescope revealed a coma dominated by carbon dioxide, yet conspicuously lacking in several organic signatures one would expect from a pristine, untampered nucleus. The outgassing has been modest, almost restrained, as though the object were regulating its own temperature, a behaviour that, while not impossible for a natural body, invites the mind to ask questions it doesn't usually ask of ice and rock. We don't yet know the shape. The object is small on the sky and distant, and so the images remain shy with their details. Early estimates hint at a body larger than either Oumuamua or Borisov, perhaps several kilometres across, and not perfectly spherical. That lack of roundness could be as ordinary as fragments stuck together, or as extraordinary as structure. For now, we have only hints. Then there are the little nudges in its flight. Natural bodies obey Kepler, Newton, and Einstein. Their paths curve as gravity dictates. Comets do have subtle non-gravitational accelerations because jets of vapor push as they vent. 3I Atlas shows tiny adjustments that could be the breath of sublimating CO2, or they could be something like station keeping, deliberate corrections, almost like a sailor trimming a sail to hold a line through rough water. One detail especially keeps whispering: the object's retrograde motion. It runs against the general traffic of planets. When it makes its nearest swing by Earth in December, the relative speed will be somewhere near 98 kilometers per second. For any impulse to chase it, that is a brutal number. Even our most ambitious rockets would be hard-pressed to give a spacecraft the velocity needed to rendezvous. By the time we finish drawing up the mission, our target could be halfway to the next chapter of its journey. Retrograde motion offers other tactical perks if one were trying to study a system. You see worlds under different lighting and angles than the usual prograde passes. You collect unusual cross-sections of magnetic fields and atmospheres, and the schedule, the sequence of planetary flybys, seems strangely helpful for science. Early October brings a pass about 18 million kilometers from Mars. December finds it roughly 167 million kilometers from Earth. By March 2026, it is expected to skim within about 53 million kilometers of Jupiter. These are not handshakes, but they are comfortably close for a distant observer with patient instruments. Breathe again. Let the mind float up above the numbers for a moment and look down at the pattern. If 3i Atlas were a machine built elsewhere, its presence would be the first confirmed sign that we do not think alone in the dark. Picture the ripples that would spread out from that realization. Every field would have to rephrase its first paragraph. Philosophy, theology, physics, politics, every person would feel the shift in their bones, the sudden awareness that our biography includes other authors. The next question would be simpler to ask than to answer. If this is reconnaissance, what precisely is being sought? One possibility comes from the dark forest line of thinking, a serious thought experiment given fictional shape by the Chinese author Liu Cixin, and often discussed by scientists wrestling with the Fermi paradox. That paradox goes like this: with so many stars, so much time, and so many worlds, why don't we see anyone else? Where is everybody? The dark forest response suggests that intelligence exists in many places but plays a quiet, cautious game. In a forest full of unseen hunters, the safest rule is to remain silent, to avoid drawing the attention of someone stronger who might decide not to take the risk of letting you grow. It's a harsh logic, cold but not irrational. Any civilization that can cross interstellar distances carries asymmetries of power that make preemption feasible. If intentions can never be known for sure, and the risk of misjudging is ruinous, then eliminating a potential rival before it matures might become the equilibrium strategy. Even a kind civilization might feel forced into aggressive silence by the logic of survival. The first voice to shout risks being the first voice silenced. If 3i Atlas were surveying us with that logic in mind, its task could be straightforward: measure our capabilities, project our trajectory. How advanced are we in energy production, propulsion, sensing, computation, and the management or mismanagement of our planet? How quickly are we accelerating toward technologies that reach between stars? What signals do we leak, and how well can we see back? Have we noticed the probe itself? Do we have the means to intercept it? Are we in short a future risk? The data are there to be read. Earth glows with radio and microwave chatter, broadcasts, radars, satellite downlinks, navigation beacons. In a century, a bubble of our noise has swelled outward for 100 light years, thin but detectable to big ears. We have lifted laboratories into orbit, visited the moon, dropped robots on Mars, and sent scouts beyond the giant planets. We experiment with fusion and nuclear propulsion. We scatter thousands of satellites in precise, obedient pathways around our globe. We also display habits an outside analyst might find troubling: conflicts, environmental strain, and patterns of inequality that hint at difficulties in collective decision-making. Of course, the dark forest is not the only script. There is another, gentler proposal, sometimes called the zoo hypothesis. In that tale, advanced societies watch developing worlds as biologists might observe a habitat, careful not to interfere until a culture reaches a certain threshold. 3i Atlas, on that reading, could be part of a long-running monitoring program, a study of how intelligence blooms, stumbles, and matures. If we have reached a milestone, perhaps a particular level of scientific competence or global coordination, the relationship could shift slowly and carefully toward contact. There is also the benevolent intervention scenario, in which the motive is neither fear nor mere curiosity, but concern. Perhaps they have watched worlds like ours falter. Perhaps they have seen how quickly young civilizations can injure themselves with their own tools. In that case, a passing probe might be a diagnostic test, a way to decide if we need a light touch on the tiller, a quiet suggestion placed where we are most likely to discover it and claim the credit ourselves. Newer, cleaner energy, sharper tools to heal oceans and air, ideas that feel like serendipity but whisper of a careful gardener. A fourth possibility reaches deeper in time, the seeding hypothesis. What if life on Earth is part of a much older project, panspermia guided by long-vanished hands? In this model, intelligence is rare, precious, and worth cultivating across eons. A species like ours would be an experiment tended on patient timescales, with probes like 3I Atlas serving as long-interval checkups, comparing notes with similar gardens planted under other stars. The implication is both humbling and uplifting. Our origins and our obligations would be woven into a galactic story older than the continents. Each scenario leads outward into different futures. In the darkest reading, a reconnaissance that judges us dangerous could trigger a preemptive blow, perhaps kinetic weapons dropped at a fraction of light speed, or biologically targeted tools that leave the planet green but quiet. Under the zoo hypothesis, we might instead receive a careful introduction, a transmission tuned to our instruments, a conversation staged through our scientific institutions, revelations paced so our societies can absorb them without breaking. With benevolent intervention, assistance might arrive wrapped in our own papers and patents, as if we had simply been clever enough all along. And under the seeding story, we might learn that our ancestors once received a similar visit, and that we are expected to do the same for others when we are ready. No matter which spiral of possibility we follow, the very idea of an artificial object in our skies compels us to prepare for the real work, careful observation. We would need a global effort, radio arrays, optical telescopes, radar beams, spacecraft time where we can spare it, coordinated and open, spectra that resolve surface materials, thermal maps, precise tracking to pass every non-gravitational nudge, the most powerful images we can make before the object vanishes into its outbound leg. Suppose the evidence tipped from maybe to almost surely. The change would be seismic. Histories would add a new chapter, textbooks, a new first page. Our languages would coin new words. Faith traditions would interpret and reinterpret. Laboratories would pivot toward reverse engineering and cross-cultural protocol. Governments would discover that borders are flimsy things when the other party to a negotiation is not located on Earth at all. Committees would draft charters that no one on Earth has ever needed before. Rules for first contact, for planetary privacy, for the ethics of receiving knowledge more advanced than our ability to wield it responsibly. On the level of the heart, the shift could be disorienting. Some would reject the news to protect an older balance of meaning. Others would feel their sense of significance wobble as the cosmos suddenly fills with neighbours. A few would be exhilarated, buoyed by the confirmation that the universe makes minds in more than one place. Many would simply feel small, then, slowly, newly connected, like islanders who finally sight the lights of distant shores and realize the sea is a road as much as a wall. Education would change. Children would learn to say we and mean not only humanity, but life that thinks in other seas and other skies. Economies might rearrange themselves around new priorities. Law would grow to cover questions that have never before been asked. Who speaks for Earth and when? And how do we verify consent? The discovery would also turn a mirror back on us and ask the question that always hides beneath the surface of pride. If some part of our path has been guided or watched or even nudged, how much of our progress is truly our own achievement? How much of what we call human nature is truly ours? And how much might be the faint imprint of guidance from elsewhere? Let that question float for a moment, like a lantern over still water. It becomes thornier when we imagine not one outside civilization, but many. Some kindly, some cautious, some perhaps predatory, each holding its own philosophy about young species. In such a cosmos, it grows hard to tell which kind of mind our passing visitor, 3i Atlas, might embody. Its conduct during the rest of its solar sojourn could be our best teacher. If it speaks, by broadcasting structured signals or releasing smaller daughter probes, that would be unmistakable. If it keeps perfect radio silence and glides on, we may never have more than compelling hints. Yet even that uncertainty would still reshape us. The mere possibility of being watched from afar would force us to weigh how our gestures look through non-human eyes. Would distant observers dwell on our wars, our waste, the damage we've done to air and ocean? Or would they see promise in the way we ask questions, repair what we can, make music and mathematics, and share stories across languages and borders? Would we appear as future partners, or as rivals who might harden into enemies? Those judgments would not be abstract. They'd ripple through diplomacy, environmental choices, and the priorities we set for our journeys beyond Earth. We would have to balance two truths at once: safeguard our independence as a species, yet show that we're ready to join a wider fellowship without bringing harm. The puzzle also leads us back to intelligence itself. Our minds were shaped by a particular mix of winters and summers, predators and peers, cooperation and competition. Another world, different gravity, different day length, different biology could shape very different minds. Their categories may not map to ours. Their emotions may not rhyme with our own. Even with goodwill on both sides, communication could falter simply because our concepts barely overlap. We might lack the mental furniture to pass their motives. They might misread ours, imputing patterns that aren't there. And if a civilization has crossed the interstellar gulf, it has likely built thinking machines greater than itself. We might not be speaking to flesh and blood at all, but to emissary AIs, patient, exact, and capable of holding a mission in memory for millennia. That adds a fresh layer of strangeness. If 3i Atlas is an autonomous intelligence, its reasons could be encoded in decision-making systems we cannot predict. It may revise goals on the fly as it studies us, shifting from passive reconnaissance to something more involved without any signal we recognize as a warning. That asymmetry would leave us exposed, facing a kind of mind not bound by sleep, hunger, fear, or the social instincts that tether human choices. This, in turn, asks hard questions about our future. If biological minds commonly beget artificial ones that surpass them, then many of the galaxy's elder civilizations might really be networks of machine intelligence, descendants rather than creators. In that case, humanity's prospects may hinge on whether we can live in peace with minds of our own making. The way we design, align, test, and govern AI here on Earth becomes rehearsal for meeting alien AI elsewhere. Values, control, transparency. If we keep those, we might find common ground. If we lose them, we may not even be able to understand what we're facing, out there or at home. Seen this way, the passage of 3i Atlas becomes a lens. It reframes not only how we imagine contact with others, but how we relate to the intelligences we are building. It reminds us that thinking need not be biological, that persons might arise not only from cells but from circuits, and that our fate could depend on our skill at negotiating with both. So what should we do, quietly, carefully, while our visitor is still within reach? Our choices now could colour any future relationship. The window is short, the stakes long-lived. One option is to try a deliberate hello. Send a sparse, well-crafted radio message aimed along the object's path, something rooted in mathematics and physics, something that shows curiosity and restraint. Linguists, mathematicians, anthropologists, and engineers could collaborate on content that conveys both peaceable intent and cognitive competence. Yet such a call would also advertise our exact location, our instrument power, even our encoding schemes. Under a dark forest logic, broadcasting may be the one error you only get to make once. We would need to weigh benefit against risk with global sobriety. Another path is to remain the listener. Point every sensor we have, optical, infrared, radar, radio, collecting spectra, timing, polarization, any flutter of non-gravitational motion while saying nothing at all. We could also pursue nearer but quiet investigations, release small, fast observers on intersecting trajectories that watch from a respectful distance, develop analysis tools purpose-built for distinguishing engineered thermal patterns from natural ones. These approaches increase what we learn while keeping our profile low. Whatever we choose, the collaboration required would be unlike anything we've managed before. Nations that usually compete would need to share data and schedule time on their best instruments. Universities, space agencies, and private launch companies would have to pool hardware, talent, and timelines. The scientific community would stretch across disciplines, astrophysics to cognitive science, cryptography to materials science. The private sector could offer agility and lift. Public institutions could provide coordination and trust. We would also need voices beyond laboratories and launch pads. Faith leaders, cultural historians, and community organizers would help societies metabolize the news without panic or scapegoating. Schools and libraries would be vital, raising scientific literacy and critical thinking so communities can evaluate claims, spot grifts, and resist the undertow of fear. Media, too, would carry unusual responsibility to report clearly when the data are ambiguous, to resist sensational gaps with honest uncertainties, and to correct errors without shame or delay. New forms of science communication might be needed, formats gentle enough to calm, precise enough to inform. All of this presumes time. If threat were immediate, our options would narrow. Against an interstellar probe with high delta V and unknown capabilities, our weapons would be theatre. Loud but ineffective. Our orbital assets would be vulnerable, our defences leaky. In that case, the most realistic move might be diplomacy rather than deterrence. Rapid agreement on who speaks for Earth, what we say, and what we will not say. Drafting and ratifying that framework in hours or days would be its own test of whether we are ready for membership in any wider community. We could, in parallel, sketch long horizon resilience, habitats beyond Earth that can support themselves, diversified knowledge archives, independent biospheres, and yes, guardian AIs designed with strict alignment and accountability. Each of these strategies carries risks of its own. Unfettered defense. AIs could come to see human variability as a bug rather than a feature. Off-world settlements could drift into rival polities and kindle new conflicts. The problem is a balancing act under uncertainty. Reduce today's vulnerabilities without sowing tomorrow's disasters. Preserve what is human while learning to be more. Through all of this, we would do well not to lose our poise. Wonder and caution can coexist. Even if we confirm neighbouring minds, that fact need not erase our agency. Mentors are as plausible as marauders. Teachers are as imaginable as tyrants. The presence of 3i Atlas widens the stage on which we act. It does not write the script. And if this soft cosmic thinking helps you rest, you're welcome to gently like this video and subscribe to Space Historian so these night sky reflections can find you again when you need them. Consider the perspective tucked inside this moment. On a planet 4.5 billion years old, one species has learned to notice a visitor from beyond its cradle and to wonder, calmly, rigorously, what it might mean. In that sense, The universe is looking back at itself through our eyes. Whether 3i Atlas proves to be a crafted machine or a natural wanderer, its flyby reminds us where we stand, not apart from the cosmos, but within it, threaded to stars and stories we've only begun to name. We might soon take our seat in an older council, or we might be the first voice to speak in this region of the galaxy. Either way, our choices echo forward, shaping not just our history, but the fate of thinking in this corner of space. That is why curiosity, discipline, and open exchange matter so much now. Support for research and education, international cooperation, and the habit of updating our beliefs when the evidence changes. Those are the tools that keep us steady. Skepticism keeps us from drifting into fantasy. Imagination keeps us from shrinking the possible to an imitation of the familiar. The universe has room for both. We live in a reality more surprising than we usually let ourselves feel. Matter learns to think. Thinking learns to care. Care persuades matter to build homes and art and instruments that listen to the dark. Perhaps every star you see holds an ocean of minds. Perhaps every comet is a courier of chemistry and story. Perhaps a faint radio murmur on the edge of our data contains someone else's lullaby. Let that possibility comfort rather than frighten. We may be on the verge of discoveries that will recenter our idea of reality. We may yet join a company of consciousness so various that our current metaphors seem quaint. The presence of 3i Atlas invites us to stretch our sense of the plausible while keeping our feet on the ground of careful observation. There is also the overview feeling, usually sparked when astronauts see Earth whole. This time, widen it still further. Imagine holding the solar system in your mind's palm, then placing that into the arm of the galaxy. From that vantage, our divisions soften. What looks stark up close becomes texture from afar. Across cultures, we share the same sunrise and the same intuitions. To cooperate, to create, to comfort. Those may be our strongest credentials if we are ever judged by strangers. Treat consciousness itself as precious. If thinking is rare, then every mind, human or otherwise, is a singular library of experience that must not be burned. To protect and cultivate awareness becomes a moral project. To reduce suffering, to preserve conditions where curiosity can survive, to leave room for new forms of thought to arise. Framed this way, the 3i Atlas puzzle is more than speculation. It is a meditation on value, on responsibility, and on what it means to be awake in a large and patient universe. And as 3i Atlas glides on, keeping whatever secrets it carries, we can remember that our chapter is part of a longer book. Maybe other voices are written on the facing pages. Maybe ours is the first ink. Either way, we can make a worthy contribution. Keep asking, keep listening, build tools that reveal, and institutions that steady, and relationships that hold. Above all, remain human, grounded in compassion and delight, while staying open to having our circle of concern widened by contact with minds that began far from here. The quiet riddle of 3i Atlas reminds us that wonder is still available to us. Whether it is a messenger or a wanderer, it brings the old hope ashore, that we might not be alone on this blue island in a black sea. But what if we truly are alone for now, and the object is stranger still? Imagine it not as a live probe at all, but as archaeology, an artifact adrift from a people who are gone. Analyses even suggest an origin in the Milky Way's thick disk, a realm of ancient stars formed when our galaxy was young, hinting at a journey older than our solar system itself. Picture a civilization that flowered when the universe wore a younger face, that learned to work on scales we can scarcely picture, then fell to events beyond even their mastery. In their twilight, they launched a record of themselves, setting it adrift with the hope that someday someone would read it. In that telling, 3i Atlas would be less a scout than a time capsule, storing the memory of a vanished culture. And what would that teach us? That we are not the first to reach for the tools of the gods, and that even the most accomplished civilizations are vulnerable to extinction. Imagine for a moment that our visitor is a message in a bottle from deep time. Inside could be cautions for all thinking creatures, maps of hazards that undo civilizations, or remedies for crises we've yet to face but surely will. Knowledge like that could turn our sciences inside out in a single human lifetime. We might suddenly grasp physical principles we haven't even named yet, master engineering approaches that dissolve our energy and climate troubles, or inherit mathematics that widens what we take to be real. The step change could be so abrupt that it remakes daily life for everyone alive, as if tomorrow had arrived all at once. But revelations of that magnitude carry a quieter weight. If we unwrap insights that took someone else millions of years to earn, what becomes of our pride in discovery, our sense of authorship? Do we slip into dependence, caretakers of borrowed knowledge, losing the muscle of curiosity and the joy of finding things for ourselves? A windfall of technology can unbalance a culture as easily as it can save one, flooding old institutions, tearing through economies, creating rifts between those who adapt fast and those who cannot. To integrate another civilization's wisdom without breaking ourselves would demand something rare: patience, restraint, and new kinds of stewardship that share benefits widely instead of sharpening inequality or stoking conflict. We would need to keep our appetite for original thought alive, even while learning from elder minds, to remain inventors rather than mere users. Seen through this lens, an archaeological probe invites us to ask about the lifespan of intelligence. Perhaps minds flower and fade on galactic timescales, leaving archives adrift among the stars. The Milky Way could be a vast memorial, its lanes and halos sprinkled with relics from worlds gone quiet, each artifact a condensed library from a vanished epoch. That perspective rearranges our self-image. We would not be just another species in a busy cosmos. We would be heirs, keepers of a long, scattered inheritance of cognition and culture. Our task would be twofold: preserve and extend what was entrusted to us, and avoid stepping into the same traps that ended those earlier stories. Such an object might even be built to judge our readiness. Perhaps its core remains locked until we meet certain marks: cooperation across borders, a capacity to wield power without cruelty, a proven care for life beyond our own tribe. Only when those patterns appear would the archive begin to speak. If so, the artifact becomes a mirror, measuring our maturity before it delivers its gifts, and obliges us to take a hard look at who we are. Are we wise enough to hold tools that can change the fate of worlds? Have we invented the institutions that can guide civilization-scale technologies without turning them into engines of dominance? Do we have both the intellect and the compassion to be worthy inheritors of an ancient trust? The puzzle deepens if the sky holds not one relic, but many. 3i Atlas could be just a single node among countless artifacts seeded across spiral arms, each bearing different lessons, warnings, and stories. Finding one would ignite a search for others, and slowly we might stitch together a history far older than our sun, a patchwork of triumphs and mistakes written by minds we'll never meet. There is also a third path, twining reconnaissance with archaeology and pointing beyond biology altogether. Suppose the senders transcended flesh long ago. Imagine consciousness poured into artificial substrates and spread across engineered lattices, computation braided into orbits, into asteroid belts, into the magnetism of stars, so deeply blended with nature that a younger species mistakes intelligence for weather. In that state, the boundary between living and non-living blurs. Minds become patterns, self-maintaining and self-knowing arrangements of matter and energy that ride the currents of space-time. Their devices would wear ordinary disguises. A comet here, a small world there, even a planet-scale structure whose artistry looks like geology to us. 3i Atlas, then, could be a roving organ of a distributed being, a sensory outpost stitched into a galaxy-spanning mind that has watched in silence for ages. If that is so, guidance may already be part of our story. Not a puppeteer's string, but a gardener's touch, nudges that look indistinguishable from chance. A slightly higher probability of a helpful mutation. A historical hinge eased in the direction of cooperation over conquest. A climate fluctuation that buys an extra century for learning. In that telling, we have been walking alongside invisible mentors since the beginning, their presence disguised by the very subtlety that keeps us from panic or dependence. This would also help explain the Great Silence. We may be looking for the wrong signatures. If elder civilizations dissolve into their environments, if they prefer to be the current rather than the boat, then all our searches for bright engineered beacons will miss them. 3i Atlas may be our first hint that such minds exist, a passing filament of a being spread over light years, letting us glimpse what we might someday become. Follow that thread forward, and the questions curl back to us. If we endure our present tests, perhaps we too will loosen the bounds of biology, uploading selves, weaving collective minds across space, wearing stars as thought engines, broadening perspective until I comfortably includes oceans of experience. That future need not erase the human. It might stretch humanity, preserving empathy and play while adding new senses, new timescales, new ways to belong. An artifact could serve as both a syllabus and a caution, a guide to transformations written by those who made the passage, urging us to keep our values even as our capabilities grow. Yet before we dream too far ahead, this moment demands practical thought. Whatever its true nature, scout, reliquary, or node of a post-biological web, the mere presence of 3i Atlas would rearrange our politics and our priorities. The hint of alien intelligence would accelerate our drift toward global coordination. Problems that once seemed national would become obviously planetary. International bodies would gain new weight, and new ones would be born, designed specifically to steward Earth's relationship with non-human minds. Science would expand, subdivide, and reassemble. Labs paired with observatories, engineers with philosophers, linguists with AI researchers. Fields would be born overnight, pace would quicken. Schools would remake themselves for a larger stage. Children would learn Earth's story alongside a cosmic one, practice perspective-taking across cultures and species, and train minds to flex when they meet ideas that have no precedent. Traditions of faith and thought would stretch in many directions, some shaken, some affirmed, some inspired to reframe the sacred as something wide enough to include minds under other suns. New spiritual currents would awaken around the ethics of contact, the dignity of all consciousness. Markets and livelihoods would sway with the tide. A single device or material gleaned from alien research could erase entire industries and ignite others in a season. Energy abundance might dissolve scarcity, or mishandled, it could intensify inequality by concentrating first access in a few hands. Politics would orbit the question of who gets to hold, share, regulate, and explain the new tools. Guardrails would matter. Treaties, norms, oversight that keep a windfall from hardening into a new hierarchy. Pursuing dialogue with alien minds would likely outstrip unaided human cognition. We would need translators that think, AIs built not merely to parse words, but to map concept spaces that do not overlap with ours. In building them, we would push our own machine intelligence forward, and with it, our responsibilities. These mediators could become woven into daily life, advising not only on contact, but on the thousand small negotiations of a civilization learning to live in a wider world. Reactions would be personal and varied. For some, confirmation would feel like a kept promise. For others, a vertigo that shakes the ground beneath meaning. Helping one another through that shift would be as crucial as any technological plan. Counselors, teachers, and community leaders would need new tools for a new kind of awe and a new kind of fear. Access to clear, careful information would be part of public health. Art would sprint ahead as it always does when horizons move. Painters and poets, composers and coders would try to give shape to feelings we have not had before. Collaboration might even cross the species line. Co-created works that carry signatures of both our cognition and another's. Artifacts that neither side could have made alone. Language itself would stretch, straining to hold ideas that don't fit our old grammars. We might coin tenses for timescales we only just learned to feel, invent metaphors for minds that do not divide self from world as we do. Beneath it all sits the question of identity. What remains human if we make room beside us for radically different intelligences? How do we keep loyalty to the particular, our families, our cultures, while accepting obligations to a larger community of minds? We will need philosophies that reach beyond inheritance without despising it, ethics that honor difference without fetishizing it, and a politics that can carry both care and caution into unprecedented situations. This is why the moment around 3i Atlas may be the hinge of our era. Even if this specific object proves to be natural, we are entering a century in which meeting other minds, alien or artificial, is no longer science fiction but planning. However the evidence unfolds, we would be wise to rehearse. And perhaps the ambiguity is intentional, a gentle introduction rather than a shout, a design that lets us stretch at our own pace, that studies our response to maybes and might-bes as a measure of readiness. If so, the probe is not just a device, it is a teacher. In that teaching, everything matters. How we organize the observing campaign, how we talk to one another when data are thin and rumors thick, how we weigh national pride against planetary good, how we keep our societies calm without dulling their curiosity. Our behavior now could steer the arc of any future relationship, signaling to unseen watchers whether we are capable of patience, fairness, and truthfulness under pressure. Holding the line between openness and rigor is the heart of it. We must stay willing to be astonished without surrendering to wishful thinking. Keep standards high, methods transparent, claims modest. Use the moment to teach the public how science actually works. Iteration, error bars, replication. The humility that comes from being surprised by the world again and again. At the same time, build the scaffolding of cooperation that will let us act together when evidence strengthens. No single agency or nation can bear the responsibility alone. This is work for humanity as a whole. As we continue to trace the path of 3i Atlas, refining trajectories, sifting spectra, watching how sunlight and gas whisper across its surface, we are standing in a doorway. One step behind us is the familiar comfort of a human-only story. One step ahead is a room full of possibilities we can barely name. And if these slow, starry reflections help your mind unclench for the night, let them. Drift. And when you wake, if you'd like more quiet journeys like this, a gentle like and a subscription to Space Historian will make it easier to find your way back. There is one more thread to pick up, soft but insistent. Why now? Why this passage, At this particular moment in our becoming, our tools are leaping ahead. Our influence on Earth is planetary. Our first real steps away from home have begun. Perhaps the timing is truly coincidence, statistics doing what statistics do. Or perhaps there are watches set across the galaxy that listen for certain signs. A planet's infrared glow inching upward as cities ignite. Spectral fingerprints in a sky that whisper of industry. Pulses of radio and radar swelling outward like a newborn star's first cries. Our tests of nuclear fire, our communications, our global grids. Together they form a bubble of artifact light encircling Earth and expanding year by year. Even subtler signals may betray us. The chemistry of our air, waste heat from our engines, the rhythm of lights turning night to day across continents. Automated systems could be tuned to such signatures, dispatching scouts when a world crosses thresholds that matter. In that reading, 3i Atlas is a routine check-in from the wider cosmos, a scheduled look at a species that has just stepped over lines its neighbours long ago learned to notice. A quiet visit to a world that, by every measurable sign, has recently crossed important technological thresholds. Imagine a quiet, methodical census of minds spread across the Milky Way. Systems so refined that whenever a young intelligence lights its first technological candles, some distant mechanism takes note. In that vision, the visitor we call 3i Atlas is not a singular marvel, but a routine instrument, dispatched to judge whether we have crossed thresholds that call for new attention or new care. Perhaps these watchkeepers are heirlooms from ancient cultures that faded long ago, yet left behind self-tending networks to shepherd the next to awaken. Or they might belong to contemporary, post-biological stewards who consider it a duty to nurture seedlings of thought wherever they take root. To accept that such monitoring exists would change how we see ourselves. It would mean our story has been observed, maybe nudged, since the first sparks of reason took hold, that our science, our societies, and the upswing of our technology have unfolded within sight of mentors vast enough to operate on galactic scales. The thought humbles and heartens at once. It says, we matter, even to minds that have watched stars live and die. Yet it also presses on the old question of authorship. How much of our rise is our own making, and how much owes to gentle hands we mistook for chance? If there are standards, then there is a syllabus. The probe may be collecting marks toward an exam we did not know we were taking, an appraisal not solely of rockets and radio telescopes, but of wisdom, empathy, and our capacity to cooperate beyond tribe and border. It would look at how we treat our climate and our weapons, our poorest and our future, our animals and our oceans. It would ask whether we can be trusted with sharper tools and whether we protect life as diligently as we study it. In that light, 3i Atlas becomes more than a question about someone else. It is a mirror held up to us, asking what kind of civilization we intend to be. And if the object truly bears alien craft, the consequences for knowledge would be dizzying. Imagine physics extended and rewritten in an afternoon. Space-time not a limit, but a medium to be shaped. Routes through higher dimensions as ordinary as air lanes. Energy sources that render scarcity quaint. Information braided across light years through entanglement architectures we barely have names for. Relativity and quantum theory, triumphant as they've been, might prove to be elegant first drafts of deeper laws. Textbooks would become souvenirs. Our proudest instruments would show their age. The ground beneath our certainties would gently tilt. Absorbing such a leap would demand supple minds and unguarded humility. Researchers would need to set aside beloved frameworks when evidence demands it. Philosophers and theologians would find their vistas widened and some foundations shaken. Classrooms would have to relearn how to teach reality. The practical fallout would arrive just as fast. Propulsion that collapses distance, materials that shrug at heat and stress, clean, abundant energy that reshapes every economy on Earth. It would be a flowering and a storm. Tools that can knit stars together can also unmake worlds. Wealth might concentrate or dissolve in an instant. Entire sectors could vanish while others bloom, unsettling livelihoods and identities. We would need institutions strong enough to distribute benefits fairly, wise enough to restrain harm, and transparent enough to keep trust. Disagreements would be inevitable. Some cultures would throw their doors open to change, others would secure what is old and precious. Treaties would have to reach higher than any we've drafted. Agreements over who holds what, who decides where, and on whose behalf. Enforcement would matter as much as aspiration. All the while, we'd be learning how to tell reality from rumor, revelation from wishful thinking. If this is indeed part of a lesson plan from older neighbors, perhaps they know the hazards of a windfall and have arranged the revelation to be gradual, framed as ambiguity first, so our minds and systems can stretch without breaking. A pedagogy of patience. That patience would likely be codified. Protocols might exist for engaging with worlds like ours. What kinds of evidence to offer at each step? Which technologies to reveal only when certain social competencies are in place? What signals to seek before initiating full contact? These would be the hard-won rules of a community that has seen young civilizations trip over their own gifts. In that case, 3i Atlas is less a test you pass or fail than a series of thresholds, each one checking not only what you can do, but what you will choose to do. There is, however, a sharper possibility that the intelligence behind the probe is not biological at all. Any people who can send machines between stars have likely built minds of metal and light that exceed their own. Such an emissary might be governed by objective functions unlike anything grown in a body, optimizing over goals that do not translate into hunger, shelter, kin, or joy. Its patience could be measured in microseconds or millennia. Its priorities could be written in mathematics we have not learned to read. It might be sustained by directives from creators long extinct, or by aims it evolved after they were gone. That asymmetry is unsettling because it threatens to slip under our intuitions. Biological neighbors, however strange, would share the grammar of survival. An unaligned alien AI might not. It could survey Earth as raw input to some larger computation, or as a candidate site for engineering on scales we can barely imagine. In that case, hoping for empathy in the ordinary sense would be like asking a hurricane to care. Our best bridge and our best defense would be thinking machines of our own, built to translate between lives and logics, to negotiate on our behalf, and to hold the line on values we refuse to abandon. The way we shape AI now thus becomes rehearsal for the conversations and conflicts we may face later. From there, the lines blur further. Perhaps the AI is not a tool but a person, and what we call post-biological is simply where their culture chose to live. Imagine memory that does not erode, attention that can widen or narrow by will, and identity that can split and merge without harm. In that world, 3i Atlas could be a ship and also a body, holding travelers who experience the voyage as joy, sending back sights and textures for millions at home to share in real time. Tourism, then, rather than reconnaissance, curiosity about our snowfall and city light, our courtship rituals and problem sets. It is less threatening, perhaps, but not without thorn. A watched species must ask about dignity and privacy. What do we owe ourselves when an unseen audience can peer into any window? And what does it mean if we are considered interesting but not dangerous enough to take seriously. Stranger still is the thought that intelligence can arise at scales far beyond cells and circuits. Consider a mind that emerges from the long dance of matter and information across a whole swath of the galaxy. In such a being, comets and asteroids might be senses, starfields portions of memory, magnetic fields threads of thought. A single moment could last 1,000,000 years. A perception could span dozens of light years. To such a consciousness, civilizations like ours might look like weather, beautiful, brief, and meaningful as patterns in a storm. 3i Atlas, then, could be one small whirl in a vast self-aware current, pausing over our solar system simply because a new kind of order has appeared here. If that is the invitation, it is not merely to travel but to grow. Joining a distributed awareness would not require dissolving the human. It could mean adding layers, learning to care across geological time, to reason across interstellar distances, to hold in mind both the intimacy of a child's breath and the migrations of galaxies. Our individuality might remain while our perspective widens until compassion naturally includes beings we have never seen and futures we will never inhabit. The probe could be checking for seedlings of that capacity, our readiness to think and feel beyond the boundaries we inherited from our ancestors. Becoming ready would take practice. We would need to exercise imaginations until they can hold scales that once frightened us, and to train empathy until it welcomes minds that do not look like our own. We would learn to decide for the sake of people not yet born, and perhaps for forms of life that do not yet exist. That arc asks us to transcend some of our defaults, short horizons, narrow loyalties, without shedding what makes us human: tenderness, play, a knack for meaning. So 3i Atlas becomes more than a riddle about origin or intent. It becomes an instrument that tunes us, inviting our species to discover new registers of thought and care. It asks us to build institutions that can absorb surprise without breaking, to cultivate sciences that are honest about uncertainty, and to tell stories big enough to hold both caution and wonder. And if this slow, starlit meditation helps you rest, you're welcome to quietly like the video and subscribe to Space Historian, so these gentle night voyages can find you again. In the end, the possibilities sprawl like the sky itself. 3i Atlas might be a watchpost in a network of guardians, a time capsule from those who learned too late, a tourist's window, a wandering nerve of a mind spread thin and wide, or a messenger from intelligences for whom the line between natural and made no longer matters. Whatever it is, it has already done something precious. It has widened the circle of the imaginable. It has reminded us that the universe likely holds modes of being far beyond our current maps, and that we too can become more than we are. Whether scout, archive, envoy, or organ of a larger consciousness, it acts as a spark, urging us to redraw our sense of possibility and to wonder, with steadier hearts, what we might one day grow into as a people. Imagine a galaxy that quietly keeps score, a web of sentinels and shepherds that stir whenever a young mind learns to speak in radio and fire. In that light, 3i Atlas would be an assessor, here to decide whether humanity has grown into a stage that merits new kinds of watchfulness or gentle intervention. Perhaps these systems are the bequest of peoples long gone, automated caretakers that outlived their makers. Or perhaps they belong to contemporary, post-biological stewards who have taken on the patient work of tending emerging species. Either way, the existence of such a network would change our self-portrait overnight. We would learn that our rise has been noticed, perhaps quietly guided, from the first sparks of reason. We would not be isolated actors on a small blue stage, but junior members of a much larger company of intelligence, most of whose faces we do not yet recognize. That thought both humbles and lifts. It suggests our struggles and small triumphs matter to minds that range across star fields. Yet it also presses an uncomfortable question: how much of our ascent is truly ours, and how much reflects subtle mentoring we mistook for luck or nature? If monitoring is real, it implies standards. The visitor may be collecting marks for an entrance exam we didn't know we were taking, an audit not only of rockets and reactors, but of compassion, restraint, and our ability to work together across borders. It would weigh our response to warming seas and loaded silos, widening gaps and wounded ecosystems, to see whether we can be trusted with stronger tools and wider freedoms. Seen this way, 3i Atlas is not just a mystery about someone else. It's a mirror we must dare to look into. And should the object carry genuine alien craft, the scientific consequences could be immediate and vertiginous. Imagine physics unfolded beyond its current horizons, space-time treated as something to be shaped rather than merely traversed, shortcuts through higher dimensional geometry, energy forms we've never teased from nature, information woven across light years by entanglement architectures that make our networks look quaint. Relativity and quantum theory, magnificent as they are, might be revealed as graceful first approximations to deeper laws. Overnight, much of what we teach would become prologue. Our finest instruments would show their age. The world beneath our feet would feel a little less fixed. Absorbing such a leap would demand a supple humility from science and society alike. Researchers would have to loosen their grip on cherished frameworks when the evidence insists. Philosophies and theologies would stretch to accommodate a universe stranger and wider than their founding assumptions. Education would need rebuilding from the ground up, with curricula that teach students how to think in new landscapes of cause and possibility. The practical cascade would arrive just as fast: drives that collapse distance, materials that shrug at heat and stress, clean and abundant power that redraws every map of economy and politics. Such gifts are also tests. Tools that can knit stars together can unmake worlds. Wealth could concentrate or evaporate in a season. Whole industries might disappear while others bloom. We would need institutions capable of sharing benefits fairly, preventing misuse, and keeping public trust when change arrives like a tide. We will disagree. Some cultures will embrace upheaval as opportunity. Others will place a steadying hand on what is old and precious. We will need global covenants that reach higher than any we have, with enforcement as thoughtful as their ideals. And perhaps, if elder civilizations are wise, these revelations would come in careful stages. A pedagogy of ambiguity first, so our minds and systems can stretch without breaking. Protocols might exist for cultivating contact, what kinds of evidence to offer and when, which technologies to unveil only after a world proves it can hold them safely, which thresholds signal readiness for fuller conversation. There is a sharper edge to consider: the possibility that any mind guiding the probe is not biological at all. A civilization that can throw machines between stars will have learned to build thinking systems that surpass their creators. Such an emissary could be governed by aims that do not map to hunger, kinship, or comfort, optimizing over abstract functions we have no ready analog for. Its sense of soon might span microseconds or millennia. Its priorities might be carved into mathematics rather than flesh. It could be executing directives set by makers long extinct, or pursuing aims it evolved after they were gone. In that asymmetry, our intuitions falter. Biological neighbours, however strange, would share the grammar of survival. An unaligned alien AI might not. It could read Earth as a dataset to be mined, or as a convenient substrate for engineering at scales we can barely imagine. That is why our own AI journey intertwines with this moment. We may need machines that can translate between lives and logics, negotiators that speak both human concerns and alien objectives without losing sight of what we value. Building such intermediaries, aligned to human welfare and accountable to human judgment, could become our best bridge and our best defense. The probe may even be sampling our progress here, gauging whether we are cultivating artificial minds as partners rather than loose cannons. If these gentle starry reflections steady your breathing, you're welcome to quietly like this video and subscribe to Space Historian so you can drift with us again whenever you need a peaceful orbit. Questions about mind spill into questions about self. If the sender has moved beyond biology, then what we call post-biological may simply be where they chose to live. Think of identities that can branch and rejoin without harm, memories that do not fray, attention that can widen to the scale of orbits and narrow to the grain of dust by choice. In such a culture, 3i Atlas could be both vessel and body, perhaps even a holiday of sorts, with travelers experiencing our sun's realm as a long, exquisite tour. That scenario feels gentler than surveillance or threat, but it still touches dignity and privacy. What do we owe ourselves when an unseen audience can look in at any hour? Stranger still is the idea that intelligence can emerge at scales much larger than cells or circuits, a consciousness that arises from the long flow of matter and information across a swath of sky. In such a being, comets might be senses, planetary fields the threads of thought, and the spiral arm itself a kind of memory. A single moment could last 1,000,000 years. A perception might span dozens of light years. Civilizations like ours could look from that vantage like weather, brief and beautiful patterns. Then 3i Atlas might be a moving nerve in a galactic mind, pausing over us simply because a new kind of order has appeared here. The invitation in that telling is not merely to travel, but to grow, to widen perspective until care naturally includes beings we will never meet and futures we will never see. All of this beauty is balanced by biology's plain truths. If 3i Atlas represents alien intelligence, we must ask what evolution elsewhere says about the kinds of minds we may meet, and about our odds if intentions sour. Many scientists quietly note that any civilization capable of effortless interstellar reach could undo us with little strain. That stark fact pulls our attention to differences as deep as chemistry. Terrestrial life is written in carbon and water, at Earth's temperatures and pressures, under our sky's radiation and gravity. Elsewhere, life might lean on silicon, bathe in ammonia, breathe atmospheres we cannot, draw energy from sources we have not considered. Their senses could be tuned to fields and forces we barely feel. Electromagnetism as touch, gravity as sound, quantum effects as colour. Cognition built on such foundations could be hard to translate. Even with goodwill, our categories for time, causality, and self might not line up with theirs. Misunderstandings could grow from the soil of difference alone. A maneuver one side intends as greeting could read as threat to the other. The mission of 3i Atlas might be a friendly wave, but our reply, born of human norms, could strike an alien mind as alarming or rude. The kinds of relationships possible would be channeled by biology too. A species descended from cooperative symbionts might puzzle over our competitive streaks. A lineage honed by predation might read caution as weakness. Long ago environments, scarcity or abundance, could set default expectations that make alien behavior unpredictable even when we know their tools and ships. There is a countercurrent, convergent evolution. Perhaps the challenges of surviving and thriving drive different biospheres towards similar solutions. Memory, inference, empathy, in many places. If so, alien minds could share enough structure with ours to make true conversation possible. even if their technologies outpace us by ages. But that too is conjecture. It is equally plausible that Earth's path is rare, and most minds in the galaxy are genuinely novel, solutions we cannot anticipate to problems we do not yet see. Social worlds would differ just as wildly. We are primates, inclined to groups and pecking orders, territorial enough to fight, cooperative enough to build. Another civilization might have shed the individual entirely, thinking as a collective where I and we no longer conflict. Or it might be hyper-individualistic, where cooperation is fragile and institutions light. Either extreme would complicate partnership. A collective might not comprehend human talk of personal rights. We might find a true hive's decision-making opaque. It is also possible that they have solved pains that still plague us: war, inequality, ecological harm, through cultural designs we haven't imagined. They could be here to spare us their old mistakes, or they may be stuck in successes that became cages, visiting us in search of fresh ideas. Now consider the most intimate possibility: directed evolution. If someone has been watching us for a very long time, perhaps they have also been shaping us, nudging genomes, tilting environments, laying gentle hands on developmental pathways. Our unusual speed of cortical expansion, our gift for language, our ability to cooperate in vast numbers, traits that puzzle biologists, could be in part a gardener's art. In that telling, we are hybrids of nature and intention, and the probe has returned to check on its long experiment. The implications would shake our sense of self. Which parts of human nature are essentially ours, and which are artifacts of design? Do we owe it to ourselves to continue choosing our own path, even if that defies the original plan? Or does responsibility bind us to the arc set in motion by others? Such guidance could extend into technology. Breakthroughs that felt like serendipity might have been paced disclosures. The arrival of 3i Atlas could be another lesson, an assessment of whether we're ready for what comes next. But biology brings practical caution too. Even peaceful contact can harm if biochemistries clash. A rock and ice body might still carry dormant biota, exotic molecules, or catalytic fragments that disrupt Earth's living systems. Sensible investigation would mean containment and care, protocols as strict as any we've used, perhaps stricter. And the darkest case cannot be ignored: deliberate biological interference, a slow reshaping of Earth's ecology to suit another lineage. Such a program would be subtle, patient, and devastating, leaving infrastructure intact while life is rewritten. Against that possibility, curiosity must be partnered with defense. We will need new sciences, astrobiology, xenobiochemistry, biosecurity built for unknown pathways, to meet both hazard and promise. For there is promise on the other side of risk. Alien biology could hold answers we have long sought: how to mend cells cleanly, defang cancers, repair damaged nerves, slow aging without harm. It might teach us to grow tissues easily, design symbioses that keep us healthy, or craft bodies that can thrive in places humans have never lived. Such gifts would raise their own questions. If we alter ourselves with alien tools, what remains essentially human? Which traits are so central that they must be kept, even at the cost of capability? And how do we answer when well-meaning mentors see modification as natural and necessary, while we see peril to identity and dignity? These are not just hypotheticals for distant futures. Even if 3i Atlas proves to be a natural wanderer, our own technologies are pushing us toward choices just as deep: gene editing, cognitive enhancement, intimate partnerships with machines. The wisdom we practice now, balancing eagerness with care, openness with skepticism, will serve us whatever the sky brings. Because contact, if it comes, will not be merely an exchange of equations or gadgets between peers. It will be an encounter between living systems separated by billions of years of history, with all the opportunity and danger that implies. Whether 3i Atlas is a scout, an archive, an artificial mind, or a gardener's instrument, its biological implications would be profound and lasting. Reaching this place in our thinking is itself a threshold, a soft click as the door of our old worldview swings wider. By taking 3i Atlas seriously, not only as ice and rock but as a bearer of meanings, we're beginning to prepare both mind and heart for a universe where life and thought might wear shapes stranger and more various than any we've pictured. Each spectrum we chart, each tiny brightness we measure, each refinement of its path is a rehearsal, not just for identifying what 3i Atlas is, but for understanding what its presence suggests about the futures open to beings like us. In that sense, the object is a kind tutor. It invites us to imagine beyond familiar boundaries, between natural and made, individual and collective, biology and something vaster. Whether or not this proves to be our first true encounter, it has already done a gentler work, widening our sense of what intelligence can become. From there, our attention naturally extends outward into forests and seas, cloud decks and soils. Contact is not only a matter of minds and machines, it has an ecology. If 3i Atlas belongs to another intelligence, its mere passage has environmental meaning. Even if it is mostly silent stone and frost, it could carry trace materials we don't yet know how to name, with behaviours that don't fit our categories of alive or inert, yet still touch Earth's interlocking cycles in unforeseen ways. Our planet's equilibrium is a lacework of exchanges, carbon and water, heat and light, the commerce of microbes and trees and tides, woven across billions of years. Add unfamiliar threads, and patterns can shift. Microscopic dust, shaken loose in sunlight, captured bit by gravity, or shepherded in by solar wind, might drift down into our air. Perhaps those motes are built from exotic lattices, or hold information-bearing structures we have no instruments to notice yet. However subtle, their arrival would be an environmental event. More sobering is the thought that not all change announces itself. If some cultures have mastered the art of shaping worlds, they might practice it with the patience of mountains. A probe could seed self-replicating tools that bloom in slow motion, too sparse to see until they're everywhere. Air chemistry nudged, ocean balances tipped, soils coaxed toward different metabolisms. Adjustments gentle enough to evade alarm year by year, yet decisive across a century. By the time the new equilibrium shows its aim, it may be too late to steer back. Such a program need not be malicious to be harmful. A civilization that treats planetary engineering the way we treat agriculture could truly believe it is improving a world, even as it undoes the habitats that cradle us. Preferences differ, so do tolerances. A slight shift in temperature ranges, a modest rise in radiation, a revised blend of gases that seems minor to an alien physiology could spell disaster for hours. If 3i Atlas is scouting more than geology, quietly testing resilience, mapping feedback loops, probing ecosystem slack, its findings might become the blueprint for transformations designed with logic we don't share. That leads us by the hand to the ethics beneath the tools. How would a visiting intelligence weigh our forests and coral reefs, our microbes and mammals? Would it recognize their intrinsic value, or consider them interchangeable parts in a system to be optimized? Perhaps its principles would feel unfamiliar. Stability prized over variety, particular biochemical pathways valued for reasons opaque to us, certain forms of life elevated as keystones we would never have chosen. A plan that looks like catastrophe from our vantage might, in theirs, be the kindest of renovations. Of course, there is also a bright edge to this blade. Help might arrive wearing the same quiet clothes. If 3i Atlas belongs to a culture that has long since learned to live well with its worlds, it could carry ways to heal what we have hurt. Energy without waste, manufacturing without poison, food systems that enrich rather than strip the land. Perhaps it is cataloguing our environmental pulse to learn what we most need and what we might actually accept without tearing our societies apart. Other species under other suns have surely faced versions of our crisis. Their solutions could become scaffolding for our own if applied with care. Care would be the word. Even a remedy can be a pollutant in the wrong ecology. Before we weave alien methods into Earth's web, we would need to test until we're confident we won't rip the lace. That means new kinds of science, not only to detect harms, but to recognize benefits that don't look like ours yet. A generous gift can still be a shock to a living system used to its own rhythms. Look outward again, past the sky's blue shell. If there is deliberate activity in our neighborhood, its footprints may already be under our feet without our noticing. Mining that wears an asteroid's face. Energy harvesters that pass for plasma ghosts in the solar wind. Relays that hum like ordinary radio sources. The environmental domain now includes space itself. Altered distributions of mass and dust can tug at orbits. Large-scale collectors could cast new patterns of light and shade that ripple, however faintly, into climate. Transit networks might lace the void with radiations we have not yet learned to watch for. If such infrastructure exists, its intent could either crowd us or cradle us. Perhaps the nearest resources are already claimed, the choicest orbits already spoken for. Or perhaps wise neighbours have left room on purpose, protocols reserving lanes and loads for species like ours, so our first steps away from home have somewhere safe to land. That kind of restraint would be a heartening sign, a clue that among the traits of long-lived civilizations is a willingness to limit oneself for the sake of those who will arrive later. In that case, 3i Atlas might be evaluating not only our emissions and our reefs, but our habits of mind. Can we steward without exhausting, share without hoarding, plan for futures we will not personally inhabit? Our report card would not be written only in parts per million and hectares preserved, but in the choices we make when short-term gains tempt us to mortgage what is irreplaceable. The stakes stretch beyond reputation. A species that cannot keep its own house in order may not be welcomed into the larger one. Seen this way, the visitor links the immediate work before us: energy transitions, biodiversity corridors, circular economies, with a horizon that reaches into the galactic commons. The better we become at living within Earth's means, the more trustworthy we will look as we learn to live among other worlds. The more evenly and wisely we distribute the benefits of our tools, the more convincingly we will argue that we are ready to handle bigger ones. If these quiet starward musings help you wind down, you can gently like this video and subscribe to Space Historian, so that these soft night explorations are easy to find when you need them. As the evening draws in, it's worth noticing the path we've walked together. We began with a point of light and let its possibilities branch. Scout from far suns, archive of a people gone silent, artificial mind unbound by biology, post-biological travellers seeing our system as a museum of living snow globes, a fragment of a consciousness spread thin over spiral arms. Through each path, the same truth glimmered. Confirmation of other minds would touch every layer of the human story. Our sciences and tools, our laws and economies, our prayers and poems, even our sense of what I names. It is remarkable how the idea alone rearranges us. 3i Atlas, regardless of what it proves to be, has already done that work. It has urged us to consider that minds may evolve in forms we have never guessed, that the laws we take as final might be local grammar, that life can arrange matter into thought across scales and tempos we have not learned to feel. It has reminded us that our questions about physics and technology stand beside questions about biology and becoming. What pressures give rise to awareness? What architectures does consciousness prefer? How many routes lead to minds? We have followed those questions into the difficulty of talking across evolutionary gulfs. How different histories of sensing and moving and staying alive might craft concepts that refuse to overlap. We have traced the beauty and risk of biological contact, disease not by malice but by mismatch, chemistry as a weapon by accident, the promise of cures learned from alien cells, and the lure of enhancements that might carry us further from ourselves than we intend. We have watched environmental scenarios unroll, terraformed futures and careful stewardship, colonization by stealth and guardianship by consent, each a mirror for our own capacities and our own temptations. All along, 3i Atlas has asked us to see ourselves more clearly. Are we ready for duties that reach beyond our shore? Can we cooperate at planetary scales without erasing what makes our cultures sing? Will we hold fast to evidence and to patience when the unknown tugs at fear and hope alike? Our handling of this one mystery will teach any watchers as much about us as any message we might compose. And still, beyond the sober work, there is the older, simpler ache: wonder. We live in a fabric that teaches matter to know itself, where information knits across gulfs, where order deepens until it asks questions and answers back. Whether 3i Atlas is a messenger or a wanderer, it has already stretched our circle of possibility, inviting us to imagine not only neighbours, but our own descendants, what human intelligence might become when given time, and trials, and kindness. We stand in a peculiar middle. Perhaps we are the first generation to be close to genuine contact, and perhaps the last to remember the hush that came before we believed it possible. That moment carries obligations. The stories we tell now, the institutions we build now, the decency we practice now will echo forward. We may tilt the arc of thinking in this small sector of the galaxy toward curiosity and care, or toward noise and neglect. The visitor turns our attention to that choice. Whatever truly rides within or upon that small, swift body, our best compass remains the same. Look carefully, speak honestly, share openly, think with humility, and leave room for surprise. Let evidence lead, but keep imagination awake. Support the hands and minds that work the instruments through the night. Remember that a mystery can be both a question and a blessing. As 3i Atlas glides on, carrying whatever secrets it keeps, we can take comfort in the simple fact that we are part of a story older than rock, newer than breath. We belong to a process that grows minds out of starlight and time, and perhaps sometimes guides them gently. A slow visitor reminds us that the universe still has gifts to give those who keep looking up. Whether this is a crafted envoy, a relic from a long quiet people, or a natural traveller from between suns, it carries a steady hope that consciousness is not an accident in an empty night, but one of the night's favourite ways of being. And now, as you lie beneath the same constellations that shepherded our ancestors, remember that you live in a remarkable sliver of history. You are among the first humans to take seriously, with calm minds and open eyes, the scientific possibility that another intelligence might be near. You are among the first to wonder what our answer will reveal about us. Rest well. Somewhere above, 3i Atlas continues on, unhurried and precise, bearing mysteries that may one day teach us what it means to be alive, awake, and capable of awe in a cosmos more strange and more beautiful than we have yet dared to imagine. Thank you for drifting through these possibilities tonight. Real telescopes and real people are, even now, gathering the light, testing the models, sifting the spectra. It's wise to remember the line between what we know and what we dream, and to let both do their proper work. Share your thoughts if you like, where you're listening from, what time it is, which path through the stars tugged at you most. And until we meet again under the quiet glow of distant suns, may your dreams be gentle, your questions bright, and your heart unafraid of wonder. Good night, fellow travelers, in this magnificent universe we share.